Looking for a cosmic adventure like no other? Zatswan, Multiversal Guardian is a high-stakes comic book journey through the multiverse with stunning art and an unforgettable hero. Get your copy today in ebook and paperback formats. Link in the description.
Hi everybody, this is Neil Allen, the comic creator behind Zatswan Multiversal Guardian, which is a 130-page cosmic fantasy graphic novel that you can purchase on Amazon in the link in the description. It is $2.99 for the digital ebook. There's also a paperback, and there is, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can pick it up for free even. And we are working at inking in some Zatswan comics right now. And while I do that, I want to ask the question, was DC Comics' Cyborg, was he simply mismanaged, or was he always meant to kind of fail? Now, that might sound a bit dramatic. Of course, there are some failures, there are some successes, but I want to ask that question while I do some inking. There's a little bit of background detail here I want to get in, and I want to get my T-square and a ruler to do that. So interestingly, I'm going to get those real quick. I'm going to pause the video and be right back. Okay, so let's put this T-square down right here and get in some background detail. So I have to give you a bit of, speaking of background, which I'm going to get in with one of my Rotring Isograph technical drawing pens. I have a 0.35 here that I'm going to get in some lines with. Really lovely pens, like the best. Speaking of Cyborg, now we do have to give you a bit of background on what exactly am I talking about here. So when DC Comics around 2011, what is this spot here? Do we have a, oh well, no big deal. Around 2011 or so, DC Comics launched its New 52 reboot, where they launched new number ones of all of their comics. And Cyborg, this was his time to shine. This was his time to show up and prove himself. He was being promoted to a founding member of the Justice League. Cyborg, as you know, has been a long-standing Teen Titans character who was debuted in the new Teen Titans in the 1980s. Okay, let's leave it at that. We only need to get in a couple lines there. And then I probably will not be using a ruler to get in this last line. I think I'll just freehand it. Bedpost right here. I figured out the perspective already on my sketch, so I don't think I think I could just whoop, add a line there, whoop, add a line there. That's all we really need to do. Now we can do some actual hatching and stuff for light and shadow, and maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that. I don't think I'm going to use my isograph for that though. So let me get some ink ready. Well, and I will regale you with the saga of Cyborg, which is a really interesting Cyborg. So DC clearly had high hopes for this character here. He was promoted to a founding member of the Justice League, had a superstar creative team working on that book. DC's hottest writer at the time and hottest artist, Jeff Johns writing, Jim Lee doing the artwork, and doing the pencils, and Scott Williams on ink for Justice League. And they did this Justice League origin story where they were kicking off this brand new universe, and Cyborg was being promoted to the team, being it'll sound a bit crude, but bear with me, and I think many of you will understand. being the resident black guy on the team, having taken that spot essentially, in a sense, sort of, from Green Lantern John Stewart, who was like, is that a bit more ink here? Who was on the Justice League when the popular and famous 2000s cartoon show aired. You know, Bruce Timm and company working on the show realized that, hey, we should probably have some racial diversity on the Justice League, you know, just to help broaden our horizons, reach other, you know, demographics. So they included, surprisingly, which was, I think a lot of people didn't see this coming at the time, they included the Black Green Lantern, which is John Stewart. And John Stewart was probably at that particular time. Why it was surprising is because he was one of the, if not the least popular incarnations of Green Lantern. At the time, Kyle Rayner was the primary Green Lantern in the comics. And long-standing Green Lantern Hal Jordan had been first turned evil and then made bad. Let's add a little bit more distilled water to this. We do this to help the ink flow. We want to add enough to help with the flow, but not so much that we dilute the strength of the ink. And notice that I'm doing this in this... I'm not doing it to my master bottle of ink. I'm doing it to this other bit of ink that I've set aside. The master bottle of ink is going to stay the master bottle. But the reason you're seeing me do something like this, I know I'm going off on a bit of an art aside. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about our core topic of Cyborg. Because especially if you live in a warmer environment where there's not a lot of humidity, even though you squeeze this cap on really tight, you're still going to get some evaporation. Now, this ink hasn't evaporated so much that it just completely coagulated, but you're still going to get little incremental bits of evaporation. So to combat that, you can add some distilled water back into it to let's shake it up. You could add some distilled water back into the mix to like help with the flow, because sometimes we get these inks and, you know, we have them for years is the thing. Like this pot of ink here can last me for quite a while, and I have a larger collection of various colored inks and things that I've had for years, and over time some of that stuff evaporates a bit. So you want to use distilled water to kind of, you know, combat that, reconstitute your inks, get it so they flow well. Otherwise, you can get some ink on the nib of your feather or your dip pen or even your brush, whatever you're using, and it just won't flow that great. So that's what you're seeing me doing here. I think it's interesting to talk about various comic book topics, rambles, and also to, you know, share my process and what I do and how I do it. Okay, so to help us dip, now you're going to see me do something interesting again. I'm going to pour this into this like cheap container because it will help me see if you have a dip pin here. It'll help me see how far I'm dipping, and it'll just be easier to get through the opening than this more narrow hole. I should probably get something a little more elegant than this just plastic thing, but hey, you know, I'm recycling and not just throwing stuff out, you know, putting it to other use. So anyway, I'm getting back to our story of Cyborg. Splash. Okay, poured all that in there, and we can get it back out with this pipette. So once we're done, we can suck it back up and put it back in this vial so we can have more of an airtight seal than what's on this plastic container. Getting back to our long Cyborg story. So what was going on is that, yes, Bruce Timm and company realized that they should have more racial diversity on the Justice League roster. I think there's an actual quote from either Bruce Timm or Dwayne McDuffie, I can't remember who, someone working on the show, where they're like, we don't want it to be just a bunch of white guys going around saving the universe. And then they brought up how Wonder Woman, I believe it was on the Justice Society, was like the secretary. And they didn't want that type of thing. So they added another girl to the roster too. And of course, made them, characters with agency. They added Hawk Girl. So, these creators were thinking about this stuff. So interestingly, when you get out there in the realm of TV and things like that, people are smart enough, conscious enough to consider things like that. And these comics, you're dealing with a lot more like insular, you're dealing with like a lot more of an insular scene, and people's just like thinking isn't, as much about that. So you get those types of situations more, where, flowing pretty good. You get those types of situations more where it is just a bunch of, white guys, things like that. Wow. No, let me get back to this. I just saw something that surprised me a little bit. Okay, let's put a little bit of a hatching behind this bedpost too. Nice thin lines with this crow quill nib, a really good pen. I like it for doing hatching and things like that. We don't have a lot we need to do. We could put some more hatching over here, but I don't really think we need to. I don't want to go overboard with it. That might just be all we really need to do here. And then we could move on down to another panel. I think that's what we'll do. Let's do that. Okay, so that's where all this came about. They realized like it's probably a good idea to introduce some other demographics here. So Cyborg, John Stewart's a black male. You're doing superhero stuff, so I can see why they went for a male there and not like a female. That kind of makes sense. Let's zoom out a little bit. Are we zoomed all the way out? I think we are. Okay, where to start? No, we should probably start over here on this figure and kind of work our way over here. Let me clean off my dip pen real quick though. Okay, hold on a second, let me pause. Okay, so I'm gonna be completely transparent with you. What I saw was an ant. And I'm like, that's weird. I haven't seen an ant in here in like, I don't even know how long. And it's kind of an odd time of year. Like it's going to be Halloween tomorrow, so it's cooling down. Usually ants are coming out more. I don't get them in here. Like I said, I don't remember the last time that happened. But I also want to get a piece of glassine paper, so I'm going to get up and do that. So I dispatched the first ant, and then I was like, oh, okay, maybe it was just an anomaly. Let me get some paper real quick. Okay, so I got some glassine paper to rest my hand on. So anyway, I dispatched that first ant, and then another, I was like, okay, maybe it was just like an anomaly or something. And then, you can probably see where this story is going. Another one showed up. And I'm like, okay, this is deeply concerning. So I got rid of the second ant, and then I'm starting to look around. Okay, now, is there a whole group of you guys somewhere? I looked around very carefully, pretty thoroughly. I didn't see anything, but I will be on the lookout. Definitely don't want to be dealing with them. So hopefully there's not. It was just some kind of weird occurrence. I'm hoping. Maybe they're trying to get warm or something since it's getting colder. So we're going to use my quill feather here to start inking in some of the... this is a big one. This nib is not the one I want. I have various feathers. I told the woman that I get feathers to one of them, that I wanted this one cut pretty fine to give me good fine lines. So in this nib, works pretty good for that. So we'll start over here and start inking in, get a bit more light for us. Start inking in some more of these feathers. Or I'm sorry, inking in some more of these figures, that's what I meant to say. But getting back to our story, I'm sorry about all the meandering. Yeah, so the Justice League was very successful with John Stewart, popular show, got a lot of new fans with that character. I'm sure they likely would not have otherwise have gotten. And, things were working out pretty good. Now, the thing about it, though, is I'm not going to lie to you. The John Stewart, the decision to do that was one of the more controversial decisions that the show actually made. To see how this is going to flow. Okay, not bad. To use Hawkgirl instead of Aquaman and John Stewart instead of Hal Jordan or Kyle Rayner kind of upset some long-time comic book reading type of fans. Like I said, John Stewart at that particular time was probably the least popular human Green Lantern. You had Guy Gardner, who made an impression because of his outrageous personality. Hal Jordan, who was just kind of your base level Green Lantern guy, and Kyle Rayner, who was the new kid they were focusing on in the comics at the time Justice League was made, and John Stewart was the Black Green Lantern, who I don't think the writers typically understood or knew what to do with quite as well. Let's So it was actually the Justice League cartoon show, I would say, that got John Stewart very popular, because you had a team of people who wanted to use him and who kind of revitalized him and just made him a very strong character. We want to see if the solution of ink is good enough to... It looks like it's flowing pretty well. We're using this feather here. But like I said, no matter how good they did with John Stewart, there was always going to be an audience that wasn't really going to be happy with them. There's nothing you can do. They just wanted another character there, someone that they expected to see in that role more, and that was that. So even though this is let's get the outlines in with this quill feather, and then we'll go on the inner parts of this figure and with an even thinner nib. Maybe I'll bring the quill back, because even though I can get some good thin lines with this feather, we need even finer lines, I would say. So there, like I was saying, there were people who just did not want John Stewart there, no matter how good the writers did with them. And I'm not criticizing those people per se. We all have our personal preferences and things like that. Yeah, so I'm not criticizing those viewers per se. But he was probably the most controversial casting. Green Lantern's a pretty big deal too, to the people who care about it. So, there was always something, oh, he's boring with the ring, Kyle Rayner's exciting with the ring, or, they only chose him because of diversity issues. And so he came under a lot of criticism. So what eventually happened is that DC Comics would be headed up. I think when Justice League first came out, Paul Levitz was running the show at DC Comics, and he would be supplanted by Dan DiDio in 2004. So that was during Justice League's run on Cartoon Network, like when the new episodes and stuff were like coming out. And she's gonna have like a shirt. I didn't pencil that in, but like there we go. We'll get a little bit of that here. So Dan DiDio, as it turns out, one of his biggest writers. So different people were coming into power at DC at this time. You had Dan DiDio, who was one of them, and then you had his probably foremost writer at the time, Jeff Johns. Now, neither of them liked John Stewart. They were like bigger on like Super Friends and stuff like that, like Justice League the show. I'm not gonna like, we don't know how they felt about it per se, but I don't think they were fans of the configuration of characters that Justice League was using. In particular, things on the show like John Stewart being there at all, him having a romance with Hawk Girl because she's supposed to be traditionally with Hawkman. So what would end up happening is that these guys would end up, just making a long story short, these guys would end up doing their new 52, where they were going to reboot all the continuity. And let me clean this off. And they were going to kind of make things the way they wanted it to be. So they wanted Hal Jordan as Green Lantern. They did have a lot of success with Hal Jordan. Jeff Johns was writing the Green Lantern comic. He brought Hal Jordan back from the dead in Green Lantern Rebirth, which was very successful with comic book readers. And so they wanted Hal Jordan on the Justice League, not John Stewart, not when they were redoing their Justice League for New 52. And also, Hal Jordan was scheduled to get a movie and a cartoon show. So they were all in on Hal Jordan, like all in on Hal Jordan. Now, by this time, the Justice League cartoon show had been on the air, and audiences were familiar with and knew John Stewart. But these guys were living in their comic book world and, working off of that. And to some of these comic readers, John Stewart ain't crap, so they're kind of thinking that. But to general audiences, John Stewart was Green Lantern. But they were kind of thinking, I'm pretty sure, like, well, we'll show them. This is not, we're going to set that right, and it's going to be Hal Jordan. Well, eventually, what happened is their Hal Jordan movie did come out. Which came first? I think Justice League New 52 came first. And then the Green Lantern movie came after that. So, but they're connected. This is all connected. This is all part of this tapestry. And I'm saying this because, yes, this does have to do with John Stewart, I would say. Like, he like plays a role in this. He's involved. So what they wanted for their Justice League, they're like, okay, so we have to, okay, so I guess now it's expected of us to have racial diversity on the Justice League after that whole Bruce Timm Justice League cartoon show John Stewart thing. But we don't like John Stewart. We want to use Hal Jordan because we like Hal Jordan. So what can we do in that situation? Well, they promoted the character Cyborg to the Justice League. Now, I'm going to, again, I don't like to do straw man. I really don't. So I'm going to, even though I feel that this was a terribly bad move, I will explain what I believe the rationale could have been to promoting Cyborg, to a position like that. So Cyborg, Cyborg was on an incarnation of the Super Friends, which was like a Justice League. I believe the Galactic Superpower show. He was on like a mid '80s version of it. There have been various incarnations of Super Friends, and what you're not seeing me do is dip my pen and getting it primed and stuff to use. So I think, and Jeff Johns, I'm pretty sure these guys are like into that stuff. So there was some history of Cyborg being used on the Justice League prior to Jeff Johns' New 52 reboot in cartoons. So I think that was one of the reasons, and plus they can get that racial diversity without, surrendering the Green Lantern to John Stewart, which they were not into. Especially, and they would argue, well, we've had so much success with Hal Jordan, like people want to see Hal Jordan, and they had all these like plans for him and stuff, because of the film and the Green Lantern cartoon show and the Green Lantern film that was like slated to come out. So this essentially left John Stewart kind of more in the cold, and it's kind of fascinating because I kind of feel that's where Cyborg is at now. Are we getting like much ink on the nib here? Yeah, we have some. So it's not flowing that well. Hey, let's see. Maybe we didn't. Okay. Had to clean off the pen a bit. So John Stewart was basically, during these guys' tenure at DC, Jeff Johns, Dan Didio, John Stewart really didn't have anything to do. And they were there for like running the show for quite a while. We're going to want to turn the page a bit, rotate things so we can get a bit of a better angle here. When you're inking, you want to like, sometimes you need to just turn the page to get a better angle with which to make your stroke. There we go. And John Stewart, didn't have much to do. So here's what eventually happened, though. Even though that these guys had like success with their Green Lantern endeavors in I think we need more ink in here. Even though they had success with their Green Lantern endeavors in comic books, when they tried to move that over to TV and movies, bring it to more of a general audience, it did not work out for them. Now, I'm not going to say completely that it didn't work out for them because the Green Lantern wasn't John Stewart. Although, to be completely honest with you, that does play some part in all of this. Remember what I said, like, audiences at that time knew John Stewart. They didn't know who Hal Jordan was, really. They had primed an audience to be into John Stewart from the popular Justice League cartoon shows, and here DC was just expecting that same audience to accept this completely other character, Hal Jordan, and it didn't really go over well. And furthermore, the stuff was just kind of not that loved. Now, the Green Lantern animated series did better than the Green Lantern movie, but at the same time, it was like, I think it had a fan base, but not enough to like make a very, very big difference. I think the people who like it a lot, but I don't think it's gonna be on any like mini list for like greatest superhero cartoon shows, whereas like the Justice League Unlimited show definitely will be. Justice League and Justice League Unlimited Um, so now we're gonna get in. We'll get in the outline of this girl here, and then we will move in with a finer nib and get into details on both of these characters. So what does this have to do with everything? We're talking about a lot of Green Lantern stuff when I understand this is about Cyborg. Now the interesting thing about that though is like they are connected, trust me. Um so this Green Lantern efforts did not pan out. So remember the whole reason, or at least a big reason, I wouldn't say the whole reason, that's not accurate, but a big reason to even have Cyborg on the Justice League was so that they can have the racial diversity while still having Hal Jordan present on the team. You know what I mean? So, but then the Hal Jordan efforts in outside media did not pan out. So what would eventually happen is, as DC kept moving forward with their Justice League efforts, they would just remove Hal Jordan from the Justice League entirely, and there wouldn't really be a Green Lantern on the Justice League, which was odd. Like, if we can't have Hal Jordan, the people running the stuff back there, remember Dan Didio, Jeff Johns, if we can't have Hal Jordan, we're still not doing John Stewart, so you're just not getting anybody. And I think the decision not to have Hal Jordan wasn't their decision. It was like higher ups at Warner Brothers, I think, because they never would do that. I really don't believe that they would just, if Hal Jordan didn't land at the box office, they'd just say, okay, and they would just keep doing Hal Jordan stuff. I kind of know that's how they would operate. I'm fairly sure, at least. Okay. Now again, this is some pretty fine stuff here, and I didn't pencil in everything. She's supposed to like be having a cape. We'll get that. Let's do this line down here. Okay. So, now the interesting thing about this though, I think this is where things started to go kind of wrong for them. And this is one of the core questions I wanted to ask. Was Cyborg ultimately did not work out. A lot of this stuff they did here didn't end up working out, which is why we're seeing like quite an about face these days. You know, John Stewart actually rising back up in prominence. We're seeing more Green Lantern and Hot Girl and stuff. Okay, let's dip again. And all of that. Because these efforts, like the Green Lantern movie, the Justice League movie, they were bombs. Like, DC tried this Jeff Johns stuff, and it didn't work out. So they eventually gave him the boot. They gave Didio the boot, and that's kind of where we're at today. And a lot of the stuff that they were promoting, you know, the way they were doing things, we're seeing things differently now. Wally West is back to being the Flash. Cyborg is not as prominent as he used to be. Let's come in here with a finer nib to get those face details. Hal Jordan's getting turned into Parallax and killed off in like direct to video movies where they never would have allowed that stuff to happen before. So you're seeing like there is a sea change here. And one of the things that we saw, like I said, during those Jeff Johns, Dan Didio years was a Cyborg promotion. And I would ultimately say, I'm saying this like in general, I would say the Cyborg thing ultimately didn't. That experiment, this whole experiment, all of this stuff, I would say, ultimately did not work. Now, were there some successes? Yeah, like I believe the Wonder Woman movie did well. I think the Aquaman movie did pretty decent. Um, and there were some successes along the way, but ultimately, this endeavor, helmed by people like Jeff Johns, gave us such bombs as the Green Lantern movie, Batman v Superman, Justice League the movie, and a critically panned Justice League origin comic book. It gave us a bunch of what we're interested in here now, a bunch of Cyborg series that I want to see exactly. Let me look at my sketch because I don't want to just start inking stuff. A bunch of Cyborg comic books that ultimately, I would say, probably didn't do for the character what the character needed for him to build like a very strong fan base to where the character can stand on his own. So they tried. Oh, they definitely tried stuff, but ultimately didn't work out for them, I would say. And here we are today. Okay. So she's going to be reaching into a cape. And let me just kind of bolden up some of the lines here. Okay, that's getting, ink's flowing pretty good now. Yeah, when we have it kind of wetter, I added a bit more water to it. The ink flows pretty good. So I'm probably going to add even some more water to my solution. Though I think we can, actually maybe not, because I think we can put our feather away now and pull out the crow quill nib and get some interesting lines in. So here's, I would say, the problem that they were running into all of this. So Jeff Johns and company, Dan DiDio and all these people put Cyborg on the Justice League, but this is the interesting thing that happened. All the other Justice League members at the time had their own comic books, like Aquaman and The Flash and Green Lantern. Cyborg is the only member of the team to launch with the New 52 who didn't have his own book. You could only find him in Jeff Johns' Justice League. So there was something about this black character that was setting him apart from the others, and it was something that wasn't a positive, it was a negative. Like, he didn't have his own title. Okay, so that was one of the things that was going on. Another thing that a lot of fans point to was just the design of the character, and also kind of the, the thinking behind the character. The other members on the Justice League were these idyllic, wish fulfillment based characters, whereas Cyborg had an origin rooted in trauma, where he lost basically most of his body. It seems he only kind of had his head left. And that was kind of his origin as a superhero. It was like something rooted in trauma. It was bad. And remember, Cyborg is the only black character on the team at this point. The other heroes were not like this. So you couldn't find Cyborg anywhere outside of that book, but you could find Aquaman, The Flash, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, Green Lantern. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. You can find them. They had all their own books, their own mythology. Cyborg was stuck in Jeff Johns' Justice League. And fans were not satisfied with that. And they weren't satisfied with this kind of monstrous character, being the only black character on the team, who, by the way, was missing his private parts. It was kind of ridiculous. I remember seeing this at the time it was coming out, and frankly, I thought it was stupid. I just knew what they were doing. Like, okay, I just knew at that time they were doing, like, I was a John Stewart fan from the Justice League shows, and I just knew at that time it was just so weird. I knew that people in the actual DC comics were like doing anything and everything they could just to not have that character. And I just remember seeing that Jim Lee cover for the Justice League comic and thinking like, "Oh my goodness." Cuz I actually like wasn't reading their stuff anymore cuz I just wasn't interested in it. But when New 52 did happen, I like started to get, I did get some wind of that. Had a look at it. And I was like, oh, these guys up to their old tricks again. They're trying to push Cyborg on people. And Hal Jordan. And I wasn't buying it. Like, in any kind of way, figuratively or literally, I wasn't buying that. Just cleaning up some, using this crow quill to clean up some of those like larger lines, get kind of cleaner edges here. So you know what I found? I did get back into reading the comics more when DC attempted to kill John Stewart, and then they gave him a series by Van Jensen, Green Lantern Corps. That got me kind of, you know, more into like reading the comics. Like John Stewart actually getting his own series. Oh my goodness, like with these guys at the helm, you like never saw that. But they were only doing that because their plans to kill John Stewart didn't go over well. So they felt, we have to kind of do something to make up for. We have to do something to kind of make up for that. So they were kind of shamed into doing something for John Stewart. It wasn't because they wanted to. Now, and I think what I just said there kind of hits on the problem why a lot of this stuff didn't work for them. They were shamed into doing stuff. It wasn't because they wanted to. Jeff Johns probably, if he had his way, would not have had, if he completely had his way, I suspect this is what I suspect based upon his actions as in how did you write the character, what did you do with the character, things like that. It leads me to believe that if he had his way, Cyborg wouldn't have been on that team. Cyborg was probably on that team because, again, the Bruce Timm Justice League cartoon show realized the need for, you know, racial diversity on the Justice League, representation, all that. Shouldn't just be, superheroes shouldn't just be for white people. You know, like, okay. Those guys I don't think ever would really realize anything like that or really respect anything like that too much. They'll grudgingly, I suspect, go along with it because now it's kind of expected of them. They could come under scrutiny if they don't have anything like that. Like if it is just a bunch of white characters. Nowadays, you know, they'll, especially after such a strong showing like Green Lantern, John Stewart, nowadays, like, you're gonna come under scrutiny and criticism if you just have a bunch of white superheroes as your main superheroes. But I'm led to believe that these were the sort of guys that when you bring that out to them, they'll like grudgingly go along with stuff, but they're not doing it because they actually really want to or believe in it. And I think that's one of the big reasons why the Cyborg character, this promotion he got, did not work. So, in that sense, it doesn't necessarily have to do with Cyborg himself as a character. It has to do with how he was handled. There was mismanagement, you know, going on there with him. Jeff Johns clearly didn't want to write him. The company clearly didn't want to promote him much. Because, like, remember what I said, he was the only character on the team that didn't have his own book at the launch of the New 52. Now, a Cyborg, they would make some attempts later on to give Cyborg some series. Um, and I'm going to have to talk about those two. But you know what I think? I'm going to give you kind of a spoiler to this whole story here. Yes, Cyborg was mismanaged, but I personally believe, and this is my opinion here, I understand other people see things differently, and I'm not saying they're just totally just wrong. It's the way they see things. I personally believe that Cyborg 2 was not the character that was designed to do what they were wanting him to do. So, the Cyborg failure, that's like part of the question I'm posing here. Was it inevitable just because Cyborg is who Cyborg is? Or that he is the character that he is? Or, was it just due to, like, mismanagement? I kind of think the answer is a bit of both, but at the same time, I do believe you also never want to say never. Like, was it possible for DC to actually get Cyborg to work, to get him really off the ground so that he succeeded at what they were trying to do? I think it was possible, though extremely unlikely. I guess that's the way to put it. Possible, though extremely unlikely. In regards to the mismanagement part, Cyborg was never going to work because the people behind, I guess like this is the point that I'm getting at this part in the story. He was never going to work because the people behind pushing him weren't like, I want to clean up some of the lines down here. I was kind of getting a little trouble with ink flow down here, so some of the lines got a little messy. Let's clean that up. Cyborg was never going to work because the people that were doing this endeavor, notably people like Jeff Johns and Dan Didio, I don't think they really believed that strongly in it or really wanted to do it that strongly. I think it was the thing they were shamed into doing. Like, oh, this is expected of us. People want racial diversity. People talking to us about diversity. Believe me, like, all you got to do is go onto YouTube and find people who think like that. They're not, it's not uncommon, just people's values are different, and that's not something that they value. Let's continue to get some of these lines in here. And so how are they going to appeal to, given that that's not something they value? What's the likelihood they're going to successfully appeal to people who value that? What's the likelihood? Now, people like Bruce Timm and Dwayne McDuffie, they understand that. They understand the importance of that. They understand the value in that. And so, unsurprisingly, and they are just very creative, or Dwayne McDuffie was a very creative individual and good at what he did. They got a character, they did it for a character like John Stewart, the Green Lantern. Let's clean this off a bit. And also, I'm going to make it so my computer here does not try to turn the screen off, because my light is like getting power from my computer. And I'm having to like consistently reach over and move the mouse and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go into the system, power and battery area, and screen sleep and hibernate timeouts, where it's on 5 minutes. We're going to turn it up to, I guess just to be safe, 2 hours for just the time being. Okay, so now I won't have to keep going back over there. Let's continue getting in some of our lines. So, yeah, it wasn't going to work because they didn't really care about it. Dan Didio, Jeff Johns, they didn't care about that. People like Bruce Timm and Dwayne McDuffie did. And so they took a character who was really, like, people probably wouldn't have ever seen this coming beforehand, but they took a character and just really made a lot out of him. A character that nobody else was doing anything like that for at the time. They got him popular and got an audience for him, and it really worked. Now that was successful. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it right now if it wasn't. Let's add some shading down in here. Big fan of this crow quill pin here. And you know, this woman, her name is Marin Falks. She's not looking bad, actually. Let's add some kind of folds in her apron type of thing here. Let's add some folds and texture. Let's get some more ink on the nib. So, I do need to talk about those Cyborg series, though. So there were efforts later on, after the New 52 had been going for a while, to finally give Cyborg an actual comic book. But you know what's interesting? It wasn't going to be written by Jeff Johns. He didn't want to do that. He's one of the people, I'm sure, behind. He was like working as DC's chief creative officer at this time, so he wasn't a freelancer. He was actually, you know, on staff at the company, you know, work with like a corporate, a high corporate position, which is my understanding is going to be like based in kind of brand management, like chief creative officer. Like this is, I believe his role would be like to go to other people and kind of keep your brand on brand, like your characters. So basically he's the one who's going to be pushing all that Hal Jordan stuff. Like if you see just Hal Jordan everywhere, on socks and on whatever, it's, I think he was the one behind that. Like, I'm here to keep, you know, the brand looking the way we want it to look, which is going to be a lot of Hal Jordan. I believe he was the one doing that. So, and I mentioned that all just was like, they tried really, really hard at that, and it went completely kaput. And it is part of our story here. They did the Green Lantern movie. It was like critically panned, and a total and commercial, a massive commercial flop, like devastatingly. It wasn't just it did kind of bad, it did like devastatingly bad. I'm not exaggerating that. Just to push a narrative. I'm not. That really is just like what happened. Okay, now let's get in. Her name is Ilya Falks. I think we got in Marin Falks pretty good with the inking. We're going to move down here and add some texture on the hair. I feel a sneeze coming, so I'm going to pause. Okay, I spared you that. So, there is a lot to talk about with Cyborg here, so I hope you're finding this kind of interesting. I'm looking at my thing of ink here. I'm looking to see if we have enough ink in here to comfortably keep doing dips, and we do. Okay. Yeah, it's flowing pretty well. And I know I kind of start and stop with my talking, but please bear with me. I do have to like focus somewhat on my comic here. So that's why I'm not just going nonstop talking Cyborg, you know, because I do have to, we're going to want all this in shadow. I do like to focus on my artwork as well, so please bear with me. I appreciate you doing that. Okay, now we'll get in some hatching down here. Clean up some of these lines. About the story. I was talking about the Green Lantern movie. Yeah, it was a massive bomb. So they were doing a lot of this stuff for the sake of Hal Jordan. And it's just so interesting. It's kind of funny to me. And it just wound up like, they let. This is the. You know what an interesting question is, and I'm not saying this to be like a troll to troll Hal Jordan's fans and stuff. I do want to talk freely is the thing. So if this kind of stuff is uncomfortable for you or you don't like it, I don't know if I want to apologize for that, but I'll just say like, I guess I kind of understand. You might be watching the wrong type of stuff. Did they leave Hal Jordan in like a worse state than he was when he was dead? You can make some case that maybe kind of, because I know they had a lot of success with him in comics. I think Jeff Johns like talks to that audience very well. You know, your basic kind of comic book person. I think he is himself. He connects with that audience well. The problem with Jeff Johns though is I think he struggles I think to get a general audience into his trip. He's just too much comic book geek. And I think he just is too disconnected from a general audience, and he struggles to appeal to anybody that's just not your basic, completely base comic book fan person, which a lot of times is going to be a person from particular demographics and stuff like that. Okay. I think we have Ilya Falkson and Marin Falks. Guer Falks is over here kind of more in the background. I don't think that... I don't think I want to outline him with a feather. Do I want to outline him with this crow quill? You could get, or it's either going to be that or a isograph technical pen. He's got a hat on. I guess we'll probably use this this dip pen here. Yeah, it's like, did they leave Hal Jordan in an even worse spot than he was in before? Because now he's known for having this utterly terrible film, and people remember that. But I mean, you know, you got to try things. Like, they took a chance. You know, better to do that than not do anything, I guess. You know, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I guess that's the question. But anyway, long story short, their Hal Jordan like projects, it seemed like they were firing on all cylinders with him, but they couldn't get him to succeed outside of comics. His cartoon show was swiftly canceled. His toys from the film didn't sell, so nobody wanted to like greenlight, or no, no one wanted to greenlight toys based on the cartoon. So the cartoon had no toys. Cartoon wasn't going to last without any toys. The movie was, nobody liked it. That affected the cartoon show. Just nobody wanted to see this Green Lantern stuff. And long story short, only the audience that Jeff Johns built up in the comic books doing his run on Green Lantern, only they value that stuff. Nobody else does. So Warner Brothers now isn't too keen on Hal Jordan stuff. Like I said, they took him out of the Justice League. Like, look at the Justice League movie, the Zack Snyder film. There's no Green Lantern in it. Just that's a glaring thing. Zack Snyder wanted to use John Stewart, but Jeff Johns and Dan Didio and these people were still like in charge of DC. And someone at Warner Brothers, quite possibly one of those guys, like blocked Snyder from using John Stewart. So again, Green Lantern can't be Hal Jordan. Yeah, it definitely isn't going to be John Stewart from their point of view. Okay, I think I'm going to come in with my isograph here and like get in Guare. A technical drawing pen. So I mention all this stuff not just to talk about it. There is a point. Like I said, Cyborg, Hal Jordan, John Stewart, it's all connected. Okay, let's continue. Let's start over here. Now let's talk about some of the Cyborg comics. Now, I didn't read the complete runs. I read some of them. It started with the David Walker run. Remember, Jeff Johns did not care enough to write the Cyborg himself. He's the one, likely, who wanted to put him on the Justice League. But, again, just keeping up appearances, you know. I mean, it's not like he actually cares about this. He cares about writing this character. Like I said, it's kind of more like after the Justice League cartoon show, it's kind of expected to, like, have some diversity. I think that's all that was about. And it's like, well, Cyborg was on Super Friends, and I like Super Friends, so we can just use Cyborg. Doesn't mean I necessarily want to, but if Johns had his way, it would have been Martian Manhunter there, probably. Because that's the problem. I see it kind of with a Jeff Johns. I understand being quote-unquote loyal to the comic books, but I think he can be that to a fault. You know, like to where he just doesn't see or respect, you know, certain things that might deviate from them. You know what I mean? Like, I see the worth sometimes in the deviations, because those comics were made decades and decades and decades ago. The audience, like, we're living in a different world now, so I'm not saying you got to be completely unfaithful to the comics, but I guess what I'm saying is that I understand sometimes when certain deviations are made, like, say, John Stewart on Justice League. I understand that. I can appreciate that. I think that, like, he can just follow that stuff to a fault. And then you get left behind by the rest of the world. Like, you can't appeal well to mainstream outside audiences, because you're busy trying to keep things in line with the 1960 status quo. I think that's the issue that I have with Jeff Johns. That's how he comes across to me, at least. Okay, let's like, you have a caller here. Actually, you know what? You have some stuff on here like that, but we'll just color that in black. That works. Like, what I was doing is this thing up here on him. It was gonna be dark colored anyway, so, you know. So he wasn't gonna write Cyborg, so they were just gonna get some black person to do it. Like, it's like, okay, so it's like, we don't really care about this much. Hire someone who we think might. So get a black writers to do it. And I'm not complaining about that. That's actually not necessarily a bad thing to do. But I also think it just goes to show kind of more that these guys just did not, they didn't care that much about this stuff. Like Bruce Timm, he cared, you know. They were just, guys like Johns and Didio, they were just doing what I think people expected them to do at the time. So, I know we've been rambling for quite a while. I hope this is interesting. I'm just going to let this go. This might be like a super duper long video. Like, I'm having fun inking comics, so we can just kind of keep it going. So David Walker said he met with Jeff Johns, and David Walker had some issues with the Cyborg character. You know, probably issues that a lot of people were complaining about. Like, you know, he's missing his body. Why is the black character like this? Like, kind of monstrous and stuff like that. This Frankenstein's monster type of deal. I remember him reporting that Jeff Johns actually he had a discussion with Jeff Johns about some of the issues of Cyborg, and Jeff Johns got mad. Um, I don't really know what went on there, although I can estimate. Remember how like in some video I told my Robotech experience, and I was bringing out some issues with like the entertainment industry at the time. You can like look through some of my videos about that. I talked about my Robotech experience in the video about, I might not get the title exactly right, but you can find it on my channel, about is Zatswan black enough? I think that, yeah, I think that's where, like, look up is Zatswan black enough on my channel, and in that video I relate my Robotech experience. Um, Remember how I said that people got mad at me and I didn't, if you saw that, I say that people got mad at me and I was kind of like not expecting it. I don't know if that's what happened to David Walker, but I have a sneaking suspicion it could have been. Like, you're just kind of bringing up some of your issues that, you know, and then people, they don't want to hear it. Because they somehow feel attacked by it. Um, like, why would Jeff Johns get mad? He probably felt somehow attacked by David Walker bringing up issues with the character and John saying that it's not a problem, why are you upset? But I really don't know. I shouldn't like assume too much because I really don't know. All we know is that David Walker, this guy that they were hiring to write a Cyborg comic series, said that Jeff Johns got angry about some of the stuff David Walker was saying. So David Walker tried with Cyborg to write this series. He didn't last. How many? I don't know exactly how many issues that ran, but it wasn't particularly long. And I suspect. Oh, David Walker kind of made it so that Cyborg could like change. Like he was like keeping himself in that Cyborg look, this kind of monstrous Frankenstein's monster deal, and that he could, if he wanted to, he could make himself look completely normal. But because Cyborg had some kind of self-esteem issues with some stuff, he was that actually worked out pretty well. These two that I outlined with the quill, with the feather, are bolder than Guare here that I'm doing with this isograph technical pen. If we look at the perspective here, these two are actually closer to us. They're like down here, and Guare is farther away. So that actually did work well. And we have an Alakazona figure here who's way up close. So we're going to probably get her in with a brush, like to get an even thicker line. But let's stick with Guare. We're kind of working from here, moving forward. And the reason I do that is so that I'm not, like this ink that we're working with, it like needs to dry. Like I think it's fairly fast drying, but see, I did want to cap this. These technical pins, you don't want to like just leave the cap off them too long and not use them. There. It's fairly fast drying, but there's you know, with these dip pens and quills and stuff, the ink doesn't dry like right away. So, and we definitely don't want any like smudges and things like that. So, David Walker made it so Cyborg actually can, it was like a reveal. He can make himself look like a regular person if he wanted to, but because of some kind of personal issues, self-esteem problems and stuff like that, he chose to kind of remain in this monstrous guise because that's what people expected to see him as, and he didn't know what people would think if, you know, he kind of showed up as like looking like regular Victor Stone, which is the alter ego of Cyborg, is like regular person, civilian identity. And then he was moved off the book. So apparently that wasn't what they were looking for. Now, like Didio and Johns and the people running DC at the time. Now, was that the issue that got David Walker off the book? I don't know. I think it could have been. For some reason, they wanted Cyborg to not be able to do that. I didn't make that line good because I'm at an odd angle. But that was one of the big issues with Cyborg. You know, we're reading superheroes here, and you're presenting the one black member of the Justice League as this monster dude, this robot dude missing his body. You know, Superman's not like that. Batman's not like that. So essentially, Cyborg is not really much of a wish fulfillment type of character. And wish fulfillment and power fantasy is like a big part of superheroes. And Cyborg just was not, you know, he wasn't really offering that. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of beg the question. Why I ask the question. Was Cyborg always gonna fail, you know, at this role DC wanted to put him in, or was it due to mismanagement? Okay, my answer, I'm gonna say it again. He could have worked, but it was extremely unlikely that he would have. And I know I haven't completely gotten into the reasons why that's unlikely. I will. When it comes to this particular topic, it's a long thing. It's a long thing, and I was there for, like, all of it. You know, that finger didn't come out looking good. It's okay. Yeah, this finger right here. See if we could kind of fix that up a little bit. Now, this is a very far away. This is a very small figure here. Like, how big is my pinky finger? So we don't need it to be completely detailed. And as a matter of fact, I think that might be all we're going to do to Guare, because we don't want him to be as detailed as these figures here, because these are closer up to us. I think we're just going to leave them at that. I'm going to cap up my isograph, and we have an Alakazona here who's facing them, so it's her back. So we are going to get a brush and ink her in. Then we're going to do the background after that. Now, will we be doing all of that in this one video? I don't know. I'm just going to let this one go. You know, I'm going to tell this Cyborg story. So David Walker, that's where we left off. He didn't last long. Some people I've seen praise his run on Cyborg. David Walker's run, we're going to bring in a Kolinsky Sable size 3 to do this. It's probably the, let's get a better point on this brush. It's probably the best Cyborg run, but that doesn't mean it is a good Cyborg run. Now, I actually personally don't think that any of the Cyborg runs are good. And that kind of goes towards, there's more to talk about with that too. Okay, let's get to inking this Alakazona. We're going to want some bolder lines here. That's why we busted out the brush. Let's kind of go over here. You could get very fine lines with the brush too, but kind of wondering, do I want to go just straight into my black ink with the brush, not that diluted kind of solution that I did, because that's what I did dip into. You might just want to go right into the master pot. We'll see how this does for us. Okay, so yeah, David Walker didn't last, and then I just don't think that any of these runs did anything particularly notable that's like worth paying attention to with that character. It's like they were here, they happened, and then they ended. And like the character Cyborg, more or less, is in the same spot by the end that he was when they began. Like none of the runs really elevated him. None of the runs. There were attempts to build like worlds and mythologies around the character. Okay, but just because there are attempts doesn't mean you're going to do anything that actually um, doesn't mean you're going to do anything that actually is of any consequence. You know what I mean? Like, is this going to be remembered? Is this going to make any kind of impression? Is it going to matter? Is it going to build something for Cyborg that's going to last? So here's what I have to say about no, none of these runs did that. So David Walker didn't do that. He went away. Then they brought in John Semper Jr., another black creator, and John Semper is notable. I mean, the guy's definitely got the resume. He was the main writer of the '94 Spider-Man cartoon show, which I am actually a really big fan of. But the work that Semper Jr. was just putting out on Cyborg, man, it was cheesy. It was like not cool. It was like really, really like cheesy and really lame, actually. It wasn't good. And I was like, I was around for this stuff too. He's coming up with villains like Hate Bit. They seem like villains like from the Static Shock cartoon show, which the villains that Static Shock faced on the cartoon show were very cheesy. But it kind of worked for Static because that was kind of an identity the thing developed. Like, man, this guy fights some kind of weird, quirky, cheesy villains, and that was just part of the identity, for Static and that cartoon show. And I think it kind of worked. John Semper Jr. also did work for that show, Static Shock. So yeah, I think I like the straight black better, for this type of let me see, we could add some more boldness to her. It's like actually get her a little bolder. And I think I'm going to dip straight into the master pot of ink, not use my solution. I think that tends to work better for the brush. So we're bringing back our Higgins Black Magic Pot. We're just going to go straight into this. So the Semper run, I mean, okay, he created the villain. These runs were filled with like daddy issues between Victor Stone and Silas Stone, and that's basically all they were mainly about. And I didn't find that particularly compelling. Cyborg was always in some boring Star Lab setting, and it was just like about Cyborg being at odds with his dad. And I didn't find it like it was like exciting or something that was really interesting to read. Others might feel differently. Okay, well, I didn't think either one run was really that great. So then eventually, while this was going on, DC was doing a lot with Cyborg too to keep, but this is where I feel like it wasn't, they're doing things with them, but I feel like, again, nothing of any consequence. You're doing things kind of, again, to keep up appearances. For example, Cyborg is appearing in a lot of these like direct-to-video movies that DC is doing. Like Justice League War, for example. And I'm at a weird angle here. I can try to get this line, or I can... Probably not a good idea. But the thing is, like, Justice League War sucks. And, it's just another one of these bad DC direct-to-video films. Cyborg is there, but you're doing things that seem like they should be raising his profile, but I don't think you're really sticking the landing that well. And interestingly, I'm not the only one that thinks this. I don't fancy myself a big Cyborg, like, base core fan or anything, but I have seen Cyborgs, like, big fans, and a constant thing that you would see with them is that they were never happy. They were, like, never happy with what they're getting, and I'm not even trying to paint things like they were unrealistic for not being, satisfied with what they were getting. I think that it was like, even though because you're saying you're promoting Cyborg and he's like got this big new position in the universe now, being a Justice League founder and being involved in all this stuff, but what's it really doing for him is the question. Somehow the fan base still felt unfulfilled. Even though Cyborg was getting some comics out that were like, featured him as the star, something still just wasn't like, let's go up here and get this area, top of her head. Something still just wasn't working out. And I can kind of tell you what it was looking back on it, and I've already actually said it. It's because the people involved who were doing that didn't really care. They were doing it because it was expected of them to do. Remember the very beginning of the story? It's probably like 40 minutes ago I said this now, where I said that Bruce Timm and Dwayne McDuffie and all those people did John Stewart on Justice League. And it worked out and it was popular. So a new standard had been set. If you're going to do DC superheroes in the Justice League, it's a good idea to have some, racial diversity there. And, it worked out with this black male character, John Stewart. So that was just kind of the expectation at the time. But again, they didn't want John Stewart because they were Hal Jordan fans. And at that point, very deeply invested in him. Hal Jordan, that is. There was going to be a movie coming out with him and a cartoon show and all that stuff. So they were maxi big Hal Jordan, as Jar Jar Binks would say. Definitely, they were, what would he say about John Stewart? John Stewart was bad bombing to them. John Stewart? Bad bombing. Okay, so the Cyborg comics, they weren't really working out. There were efforts to build mythologies for Cyborg, but even to this day, I don't think anything's really panned out to where it's like, wow, you made a big difference there. But they tried. They tried. Now, again, this was a thing that was possible to happen, though I would say extremely unlikely. Now, why would it be extremely unlikely that DC could build a really good mythology surrounding Cyborg? So I will say, yes, possible, though unlikely. First of all, like, I am building quite a mythology here with Zatswan, and go read what people say about Zatswan. It's like, wow, this guy's world building's pretty deep, and he puts a lot of heart and care into what he does, and it's kind of surprising. It seems like whoever's behind this comic that I'm making, it seems that people seem to be able to tell that the dude behind it is pretty creative. He cares, and he's really giving it his all, right? That's the problem. Nice line right there. You see that? Like, only a brush is going to give you, like, a line like that. Really fluid, good brush control. Had to do it in a single stroke. I saw what I needed to do. We got to get this Alakazona curvature down. And so, brush gives us those nice, soft, fluid lines. Let's continue going. So, you're gonna have to get someone who cares about Cyborg the way I care about Zatswan. You're gonna have to get someone to put into Cyborg what I am putting into Zatswan here. Not impossible, but unlikely. And you know why that's unlikely? This is something that these companies often struggle with these days. It's going to take a lot of, basically what I'm saying is that's going to take a lot of creative energy. Some people don't even have that creative energy. Like they just don't have it in them to successfully do that. John Simper, I don't know. I've seen John Simper do some, like his Spider-Man cartoon show was I have memories of it being excellent, but if I think part of the issue is I just think about the good stuff about it. Like when I think of, you know, that show, I think of like Turning Point, which I love it so much. I know the name of these episodes. That's the episode where Spidey fought Goblin on the bridge, you know, except instead of Gwen Stacy, like the night Gwen Stacy died, it's like they had Mary Jane there. That was a really good episode. And it was just amazing. And, you know, that was so amazing for kids' cartoon shows at the time that they did that. But it's kind of one of the things I want to talk about, too. Like, John Simper, what he did with Spider-Man was so great. But then again, it's like you had this massive cachet to work with. Like, you had all these, like, iconic, brilliant stories with Spider-Man, you know, to use, and you know you had a lot of great material to work with a character like Cyborg. That's not there, and you're going to need to like build stuff from the ground up. And do you have what it takes? You know, do you have what it takes to do that? John Simper, I don't know that he does, because I've never seen him do anything like that. I've seen him work on properties that were already well established. And even when it came to the Spider-Man stuff, I have fond memories of the good stuff. There was a lot of stuff on that cartoon show that, you know, when I think back to it, it's like, like, for example, bro, what is your obsession with Michael Morbius? You have so many cool villains you could be using. I'm glad they didn't overexpose Venom. That was actually a smart move. Like, the best villains, they weren't always there, like Venom and Green Goblin. But man, like, who is always there? Like Michael Morbius. But I do kind of think I'm doing a big aside here, but again, we're rambling. That's what we're doing here. I do think I do understand the obsession with Michael Morbius, actually. I think that we're going to have to get in these long Alakazona, like, this is going to be a long stroke. I can't do that in one stroke. It's too long. Let's see what I can do. I do think I understand the obsession with Morbius somewhat. I think that Simper Jr. used it as a vehicle through which to promote the black hero Blade the Vampire Slayer. So I can kind of respect that. And John Simper actually did a lot for Blade. He doesn't deserve the credit he gets for Blade and Whistler and all that stuff. Like, he's a part of that tapestry, like the success of Blade, I would say. Because Blade's appearance in the Spider-Man cartoon show in the 90s, that paved the way for Blade to, you know, be successful in film. Like, okay, kids know who he is, and oh, it's Blade, you know, from Spider-Man cartoon show. So anyway, yeah, like, getting back to the point though with Cyborg, you're gonna have to, if you want to like build a mythology and stuff around that character, that's gonna take a lot of creative energy, and some people legit just don't even have that. You know, it's uncommon that you could actually find someone who can like do that really, really well. I mean, they're out there, but you know, it's kind of okay. So now we want to get this ringlet in here. It's uncommon. So I would say you can find I want to get like, we could leave it like that. You're gonna have to find the person who actually has the ability to do that. Okay, so that's gonna be hard in itself, right? Here's hard part number 2. If they have the ability to do that, why is someone who has the ability to do that, why are they going to do it for Cyborg? Why aren't they going to do it for, say, Zatswan? Get what I'm saying? Nowadays, there are so many options open to creators that they can get their own ideas out there like a lot easier. Just like I'm doing here, for example. Like, I want to talk to some people. I can just hop on YouTube here and, talk to people. I don't have to go through some industry gatekeeper to like connect with you right now, And another thing too, there have been we've seen examples like Jack Kirby and Alan Moore and Steve Ditko and all these people, and Jim Shooter even, of all these people who gave all of that energy to this industry, and they ended up broke and broken by this industry. You don't want to be those people. You want to be the Frank Miller. You want to be the Robert Kirkman. Those are the people who make it, and the way they make it is by owning their intellectual property. So this is what I'm saying. To get Cyborg off the ground, first of all, you're going to have to find a person who, A, has the ability to do that for Cyborg, and that is not, it sounds like it might be easy, but it's not. I've said this before a lot. I don't know if anybody, I haven't said it lately, so you might not have heard this from me. A lot of people, like everybody can write, but it's rare to find somebody who can write very, very well. Now, a character like Hal Jordan had an enthusiastic creative team. Jeff Johns doesn't appeal to me at all, but I do know that Jeff Johns strongly appeals to the audience that likes him. Like, there's an audience that he just connects with, like, perfectly. It's not me at all, but Jeff Johns knows how to talk to that base, kind of generic, base level comic book reader guy. And there was a creative team that was enthusiastic, that was willing to put all that energy into a Hal Jordan. Because they just liked the character that much, cared about what they were doing that much. So they were able to get that off the ground, and it panned out for them, and it worked. Cyborg, does anybody care enough about Cyborg to put that type of energy into him? Does anybody care enough about Cyborg? They had Ivan Race on the David Walker run for like the first, 3 issues or so. So they try putting, he's like one of DC's top artists at the time. They try putting one of their top guys on the Cyborg book. So I will say that, but you're going to have to stick it out. You would have to stick it out. You can't just do, they did 3 issues and said the sales aren't there to justify this guy's cost. I think that's what it was. So they pulled him off and put a more like lesser known name on the book. But the thing is, you're going to have to stick it out, because that character is going to need to find his audience. Just like here, Zatswan hasn't made me a billionaire, yet I'm still putting that energy in, because I know Zatswan's not going to do that for me right away. Now, there is a chance it can do that for me. I just know Just like with this YouTube channel, I'm not going to be hitting like 200K subs like tomorrow or in a year. Probably not even in a year. Not in a month. This is a thing that you got to be in it for the long haul probably. And then you can like start finding your audience and getting it to work. Who's willing to stick it out with Cyborg? You know, like that. Like, this is like what the character would need, and that's why I'm saying it's possible you can like get all of that stuff to work. However, like I keep talking, who's it? I mix up who which one it was. It's either Admiral Moti or General Tague, or I believe that's their names. Is like it's in Star Wars A New Hope. It's when those Imperial officers are gathered around the table and it's like something, however unlikely. Like somebody says a line there. Go back and look up that scene on YouTube. That's what I'm thinking of. It's possible, however unlikely, you know? Yeah, possible, however unlikely. That you'll be able to get all this to work. These are all the things that were working against Cyborg actually succeeding, and ultimately I would say Cyborg did not succeed. And the reasons he did not succeed are these are the reasons. Like, this is what it would take, and like no one was putting that type of it. No, they didn't even want to do him from jump. Like the people, some of the decision makers like Jeff Johns and Dan Didio, I don't believe they really wanted to do him. I think they were just paying lip service and, oh, diversity, I guess we got to do this. Oh, I'd rather have Martian Manhunter there. But if anybody's got to go, it'll be Martian Manhunter. Definitely not Hal Jordan. I think, so, I mean, he kind of hit a speed bump right early on. Because the people behind him didn't want to do him. But, you know, one thing I really haven't talked about, I talked about it a bit, just the nature of this character. Okay, we're talking about idealized superheroes, a peer of the Justice League characters. This ugly robot dude, that's not gonna work. You know, this is the one black character. Now, some could point to, like, well, back in the 60s, Ben Grimm was, like, the most popular member of the Fantastic Four or something like that. I get that. I understand that. But we're talking about the Justice League where there's Superman, and in a world that's post-John's Superman, Batman, and all these characters, and this is a world post John Stewart in the Justice League. I penciled these ringlets in here down here, but I don't think that we would even see them. They would be more over here. So I'm not going to even get that. So that's just going to be off panel. So what you're not seeing me do is I'm dipping my brush. Like I've been doing a lot of dipping that you're not seeing. Okay, so let's continue to get in Alakazona. Let's get in some of these areas behind. Like there's a little bit of shoulder. There's going to be a little bit of shoulder in here. There's some curve. We're going to have to get that with a good stroke. Here we go. There we go. Some curvature in there. Let's get her... Let's not get her arm here. We're going to go down here because I don't want to smudge this ink. So I got to be kind of strategic about where I go and when. Let's get in this down here. Nice bold shadow. Okay, and that's going to be covered up by hair. Alright, and let's go up and get that shoulder. No, there's a little bit here. So, yeah, this is like... Let's talk about the character. This ugly robot guy. Now... Was that going to... No. Essentially, no, that wasn't going to work. Cyborg's just not a wish fulfillment character. He's like... I don't think we're going to see any more of her arm there. It's going to be covered by her hair. That was one of the big criticisms with him. He's just not sleek. He's bulky. He's ugly. And they just did not see... Okay, so I saw all this, and I just remember I thought just how lame all of this is. Like, okay, you're going to have a leg down here. Let's go down like that. Like, I remember seeing that Jim Lee, Jeff Johns, New 52, Justice League Origin cover. And I just remember thinking, this is so lame. And I know my opinion isn't like the only opinion in the world, but I do think it carries some weight. Like, when I see that stuff just isn't going to work, I'm not the only one who's going to feel that way. I know I'm not the only one who's going to have the grievances I have. Like, the Hal Jordan thing, I knew wasn't going to work. This is going to sound like incredibly, like, self-indulgent. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm just going to take a risk and say I knew it wasn't going to work because I wasn't into it. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, because I wasn't one of these comic fans that are just kind of stuck in comic fan land. I was more of a regular person. I knew, like, man, this Hal Jordan push is working with them, but it wasn't working with me, so I was like, it's probably not going to work out here with all these other regular people, and it didn't. Now, Hal Jordan has a long-standing, do we need to dip again? A long history with these comic people, so they kind of respect that, but there are some things I know that's just not the way to go. And you can't really tell that to a comic book fan. Like, running away from Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, I've talked a lot about that. Man, guys, that's just not the way to go. That a lot of people out here, I know not everybody in the world, most people in the world probably don't really know or even think about it at all, but that's what these people out here know. If they know anything about anything, they're going to know that, and they're going to like that. They're not going to be thinking like, well, in the comics, this is where Jeff Johns, like I was saying, where he goes wrong. They're not going to be like, well, in the comics it says you gotta do this, and that's not what the comics say. They don't care. Here's what they have. What they really care about, above all else, is just what they know and what they like. They may have some respect, some to an extent, for comic book accuracy, but it's not going to trump what they know and what they like. That's what they're really going to be into. You know what I think I might do? I might come in here with a pencil and like pencil in some of the finer details of her hair, but since I'm going to clean my brush, I'll like clean it with water. But I'm going to get in some of the details with the brush. So here we have our, let's see what our panel looks like. Maybe, can I zoom out anymore? No, I cannot. But I'll just move this is my light here. I should probably put some glassine paper down there so it's not sitting on the actual page. Here's what we have so far. So we have Alakazona way up front here facing them. Then these characters here, and then Guerre's kind of, he's like considerably bigger than all these people, but he's further away. You can tell how close they are by where their like feet are positioned here. This is all a level surface, so he's further back than them. Then we don't even see Alacazona's feet here because they would be like way down here. She's up pretty close. And I think we're getting it in pretty good. We're denoting the hierarchy of characters and their closeness to the camera with our line weight. I got in the Alakazona with bolder lines with my brush. As you saw, we used the quill, we used my feather to get in these characters, and just a Rotring Isograph technical pen, and left off the detail, like all this inner detail. I don't think we even want to put it on there. let's get in some of the details of the hair with the brush, and then there are some other details I want to come in here and get. uh, I'm still really proud of this really beautiful line here. Like, look at that with the brush that I got. I was just like, bam, like, did it. I knew what I had to do, and I'm good, like, woo. That, like, thinner here, bolder here, just really beautiful sinewy line that you can get with the brush. You don't get that with any other like inking tool. That's why I use brushes a lot. But getting back to it, what was I talking about in particular? Oh yeah, like kind of the Jeff Johns, like, man, yeah, that's like I knew a DC led by him wasn't gonna work because he doesn't get that enough. He's too caught up in comic books. Like, the thing about it, the comics aren't perfect. Like, the comics aren't perfect. Deviations here and there. I get why some of them happen. Um, so I think Johns is too into like, okay, then this is gonna go back here. Too into like upholding old comic book stuff and upholding old comic book biases. And a lot of people are gonna feel very alienated by that. And I realize that. Uh, and so they're not gonna indulge. And it's especially bad when you get them to indulge, but you go back to old biases again. And they're the type that would do that. So, you know, you just end up not being very good at appealing to a general audience, and I think that's what like his problem was. Okay, so let's get in some lines up here like that. Alakazona has like a really elaborate hairstyle. So it's really interesting. Like, there's a lot of detail in her hair, and you kind of want to... Okay, let's like twist this over here. So that's what I'm saying. Cyborg, I don't think was even fit to... there are other things I want to address too. Cyborg was not fit, really, I don't believe, to do what DC was looking for him to do, which is be what John Stewart was, essentially. You know, that premier diversity character in the company. You know, because I don't think enough fans were going to get behind him, like being robotic and busted up and broken, and then kind of treated as like a stepchild that they don't even want to write like the company wants. I just don't think that was going to work. I think it was doomed to fail right from the beginning. So, going back to the core question, was Cyborg always going to fail? Or was he just mismanaged? What do I think both, actually. Okay. I was working on getting some detail in Aleka's hair here, and I think we're going to come in with pencil and continue to like clean off the brush here, continue to do some details on her hair, and then come in with the inks on top. I think, yeah, he was never going to be what they wanted him to be. He's just not, he's not a wish fulfillment character. I think people like black readers and stuff like that are looking for something like that. I don't think they're looking to escape into being a guy missing his body and missing his private parts and, you know, being the ugly duckling. And I don't think they're looking to be into this guy that even the company doesn't seem to be fully behind. Like, the company doesn't seem like they wanted to do him. There's like one last part of this story I think I want to address. And it kind of goes back to that David Walker run. And that is Cyborg fans. Now, I've talked about this before. But, so, this is a good time to bring this up because that's a pencil sharpener. I think it vibrated your view, which may have been interesting. It'll be interesting to go back and see what that looked like. I think the fans realize that, okay, Cyborg is this. He might not be what people are like looking for him to be. So what about changing him to meet that expectation? And to do that, like, how do you do that? You apparently turn him into a god, like a tech god who can, like, you know, do anything and make himself look all beautiful and stuff, which David Walker kind of did that. And that's when it seems to me that DC was like, no, we're not doing that. Okay, so yeah, that's like that was like a notion from fans, like, okay, so Cyborg doesn't meet these expectations that people might have of him. What about making it so he can? You know, by turning him into using his abilities so he can use nanites to, like, make himself look normal and do all this stuff that turns him essentially into a god. It was like a fantasy that, like, a number of Cyborg fans had, it seems. But David Walker may have been working in a direction like that, but as soon as he started going down that road to where DC wanted to where, like, he was making Cyborg look, to making it so Cyborg could look like a regular person, DC was like, no, you're done. What do I think about all of that? Here's what I kind of think. This is like, because I think they're thinking, like, this is the thing that could have gotten him to work. At that point, I think you're turning him into a different character. Something that he was never designed to do. That's the argument against, like, doing the whole tech god thing. Here's what I want to say about that. Like, you don't want to say, like, stuff could never ever, you know, work. Some that maybe, but yeah, the issue with that, as I see it, though, is that's, you're gonna get pushback on it, and I think from people, there's going to be an audience that's like, this isn't the Victor Stone that I came to like and know. And now the argument you can make to that is you're just comfortable with him being a nothing character that, like, stays in his place of being an ugly duckling. It's a little bit of a tricky situation. Like, when DC starts doing stuff that will actually get Cyborg to work, then people are going to have a problem with it because they want him to still be in that old Teen Titans mold. Now, let's go back, and one thing we haven't talked about too much is Teen Titans, where Cyborg has easily had the bulk of his popularity. Yeah, like, Cyborg is known for being on the Teen Titans, and he's done pretty well for himself in that context. I'm of the belief that DC just went with the wrong character. The tech god thing, I don't know. I mean, it's not anything on paper to me that I was like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. It to me just sounds like a different character. Now, would it work or not? I don't know. Maybe it's something DC should try. It's not anything that like especially excited me though. That's why I'm kind of like, like not horribly enthused. I think that DC was of the thinking that this isn't Cyborg anymore. Um, like if you start making it so Cyborg can just look like whatever he wants all the time, you lose a lot of that pathos that actually makes Cyborg Cyborg. Like that. That's like part of the character's DNA. Um, Now, of course, yes, some would argue that, well, that's dated and it's old, and that really perhaps shouldn't even be part of the character's DNA if you want him to work. Like, if you want him to be a wish fulfillment character, here's like the way to do it. And I think they expressed a lot of frustration because DC just wasn't going that way. You know what I mean? When David Walker tried, DC just, I think, took him off the book. Um, yeah, I think you're kind of looking for a different character. Now, Cyborg was, like I said, and this kind of goes to, like, I don't think he was ever going to work. He wasn't meant to be that. Like, you're trying to change him into something he wasn't meant to be, and I don't know. You want to never say never. Like, it might work. Maybe it could have. But, you're kind of like just doing something totally different there. And until you have like proof of concept, like a strong one, then I don't know, you know. But you're taking them away from like what actually did get Cyborg popular. In the context Cyborg was popular, Teen Titans. Um, there are going to be people who are going to be looking for Cyborg to be that character that they know and, like from Teen Titans. Like, you are going to deal with fans like that. And I think there are fans like that out there. Um, it's just that how can I put this? Cyborg, I think, works well in a certain context. Cyborg was meant to be a guy on a team who supported a team dynamic. And I think Cyborg has done that pretty well. The thing about the Justice League characters is that usually they can work well on their own and have their own mythologies and things like that. That's what Cyborg did not have. There were some efforts to attempt to give Cyborg something like that, but as we've already talked about, they never really landed, and it's kind of unlikely that they would, because it would, like I mentioned, it would just take a lot from the creative team to get that to work, and it's unlikely you're going to find somebody who can't even get that to work, and it's unlikely you're going to find somebody who that's what they want to devote themselves to, getting Cyborg to work. Why, when they can these days just create, you know, if they felt that strongly about it, they can create their own thing and use their ideas on that, where they stand to potentially make a lot more money. Know what I mean? Because they'll own the intellectual property, like I was talking about before. Okay, getting in some of this hair texture here. So now we're doing the detail on Alika's hair, which is interesting. And then we'll do more detail on just, there are some lines I want to get in on Alika. Still like on her body. But first let's get in her hair. So, Yeah, it's like some of these fans. I've noticed this with some characters. I don't know if there's a thing behind it, but interestingly, some of the black characters, I noticed this the most. Some of their fans just, you don't want to get in the way of their, fanning out. Like, believe me, I understand that. But they like want their favorite characters. Like, I've seen this with Vixen too. They like want their favorite characters to be like nigh omnipotent. Like, Vixen should be able to use the powers from anything. And then it's like, well, you're kind of making the character like boring if they can just do anything. And I noticed that from the Cyborg fans too. They just want him to be able to do like anything and turn him into this completely different character where he's like this cosmic tech god. Okay, so there is some grounds, honestly. There is some basis for that. Like in Jeff Johns' Justice League, they did have it where Cyborg got like a mother box, like a new God's technology, like put inside of him. So, and interestingly, the company did not utilize that other than making Cyborg, the fans kind of poke at it as him being the team bus. He just boom tubes people around, and you know that's all like Johns was really doing with that. So there is like some basis, I think, for that whole tech god thing, but at the same time it's like yeah, I think you go too far with that. You're getting too far from the kind of Cyborg does have fans within a certain context. He does have people who expect to see him a certain way, mostly like I'm talking about like Teen Titans stuff. um Teen Titans is very popular. We haven't talked that much about it. And Cyborg is like a popular, or he is a known member of that team. Like I said, Cyborg I think works well in a certain context. And I'm not saying this to diminish him, and that's the context of Teen Titans. On his own, he was never designed to work on his own. So it's no surprise that he doesn't have a lot of legs on his own. Heck, I think Zatswan probably like has more legs on his own than Cyborg does. Um, but then again, Zatswan was designed from inception to do that. I'm not saying characters can't ever change and are statically locked into a thing, but here's what would need to happen. Either someone would just have to, and this does happen in comics, someone would have to like by chance stumble onto like a way for Cyborg to work. And yeah, a lot of times comics has happy accidents, you can say it, put it that way. Or someone would have to put in all that work that I was alluding to earlier to get Cyborg to work. um and yeah, it's possible that can happen, but that type of stuff is like, it's hard to like completely predict that and completely control it. Like, it's just a hard thing to predict. Sometimes the stars align, like with John Stewart on Justice League. I think just all the stars kind of aligned with that. He had people who liked him that were working on him. They worked hard, they put in the effort, they liked what they were doing, and they were just the right people at the right time for that job. You know, here's the problem that DC Comics was having. You're hiring these writers to write Cyborg, so you're making some effort, but you're trying to. The stars, I don't think they ever lined up for him like that. Like, where the right person at the right time to do, that particular job. Hold on a second. Showed up and was there. I think, but yeah, Cyborg works in a certain context, and I'm not like that works. Then that is on a team like the Teen Titans. On his own, he doesn't work well. I'm not saying that to disparage the character. There are popular characters like that, like say Scott Summers, Cyclops. Like, who doesn't like Cyclops? X-Men without Cyclops, that's kind of a weird idea. Um, on his own, Cyclops I don't think works that well, and I'm not the only one who would think that. On the X-Men, though, he's brilliant. Okay. Let's continue to get in the details on Alika here, and then we'll like wrap things up. But we've come this far in our gigantic, mega cyborg video. I think we may as well just keep going with our cyborg marathon. It's a pretty deep topic, and I appreciate having you all along with me. So anyway, one interesting thing to talk about. There's still things I haven't talked about even yet. Yeah, DC was obviously trying a lot with Cyborg. They kept putting him in these shows like Doom Patrol. He was in Justice League, the movie. I don't think that did any favors for him, though. It just probably hurt him. But they were, he was very present. He was like, that's one thing I can say that they were doing with him. Cyborg seemed present. Yet at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, his fans still did not seem fulfilled and happy. It always seemed like they always seemed unfulfilled and not happy. So ultimately, I would say DC's Cyborg experiment did not work. I don't think they elevated Cyborg to a place he wasn't at before. Not somewhere that's good. Now, some of this has absolutely nothing to do with Cyborg. The Justice League movie just sucked, and he had the misfortune of being involved in it. That Zack Snyder universe just didn't work out. Okay, let's get that in there like that, and another. These are interesting lines, again, lines that you can get with really good brush work. And let's get some lines down there like that, and some lines in here like this. Okay. And let's go down here and work on that ringlet of hair. So yeah, he was in Doom Patrol, he was in Justice League, he was in Smallville. He was probably in some other stuff I don't even remember. Made his way into games like Injustice. So he was around, but it was like around but not mattering. There were efforts made with comic series with him, but I would say none of them were that great. I don't think any of them were that lasting. And I don't think any of them, like, Alec is going to have, like, a sleeve here. Any of them did anything for him that really boosted him to another level. Now, you can say DC failed Cyborg, and he wouldn't be wrong. But at the same time, I don't think DC was ever going to win with what they were trying to do. I just don't think that at that point. So yeah, there is mismanagement, but I'm also going to say that I just don't think Cyborg was the character that was going to do what DC wanted that character to do. I think that was ill-advised what they did, trying to promote this character as their like premier black male character to like get that demographic invested and involved. No, I don't think this is in a post John Stewart Green Lantern world. Not gonna work, like, cause you're going from John Stewart to Cyborg. That's a lot of people are gonna see that as a massive step down. And that's not, I'm just kind of telling you like what it is. I understand not everybody feels that way. That's not like a dig on Cyborg. But it was kind of interesting because you had a lot of Hal Jordan fans pushing him. It kind of brings back memories now that I think about this, and just the just the disingenuousness of it all. Now, one thing I will tell you is that I've always been, love it or hate whatever I'm saying, I've always been very upfront with you. You know, here I've always been upfront with how I feel, what I think, the characters I like. I've never been disingenuous, I wouldn't say. Um, I believe what I say, and it just kind of takes me back to a time when, how, in debates with Hal Jordan fans, how they would be trying to put Cyborg over like they actually cared. No, they did not. He was just a tool to use against John Stewart taking the spotlight. Oh, there's your black guy there. Yeah, that's just the world we live in. That's the way it works sometimes. Uh, like, okay, if our black guy's Cyborg, the black guy's gonna be Cyborg, then no John Stewart. Like, then the Green Lantern could be Hal Jordan. That I've never respected that because it's just so disingenuous and like I don't say the things I say just because I'm a John Stewart fan. I'm not. If you think I'm like anti-cyborg, um, in general, I don't think I'm anti any of these characters. Like I'm a, if any everybody knows, like I'm a big fan of John Stewart and Hawkgirl, but you don't see me like slagging off Vixen here. You know, why isn't uh, Dip Pin being a little temperamental? Maybe it needed a little bit of cleaning. Uh, yeah, I think I should swish it around in more water after this. But no, I don't do that. Like, I just see like Vixen is just another character. That's her own thing. Um, I just don't have a lot of interest, so I don't really talk a lot about it. Um, I'm not like opposed to Cyborg. I think the role that DC was trying to put Cyborg in, he was not like good for that. And yeah, it's quite a step down from John Stewart if you're like trying to get that like black male comic fan investment. It's like that's a going from Cyborg to John. I'm sorry, going from Cyborg. No, I'm sorry, going from John Stewart to Cyborg. It's like what? Um, so he kind of had a tough path ahead of him. You know, if that was the goal, which it essentially was the goal. Um, let's clean some things up with this quill pen here. Our crow quill. Kind of want to get in that with like a dip pen. Okay, like I can add some shadow back here, but I'm wondering if it would just get in the way of the, like compete with the hatching that we did on the hair. So maybe I won't do that. Let's see about getting in some hatching down here a bit. Just a bit. I don't think we need too much because I don't want it to yeah, why are you like being, that's the thing about, okay. There we go. Had to get you going a bit. Talking to my pen. Okay, that just adds a bit of volume there. And you know what? Let's do some work on the that armband that she has. And we're coming kind of near the end of working on these figures. if there's not enough ink in there. Okay, here we go. Just a little bit of shine. So that we have to ask ourselves the question now: what about nowadays? What eventually ended up happening? You know, like, where's our story now? Well, DC seems to be investing more in John Stewart and less into Cyborg. Now, all those people eventually. Let me clean this. There might be a little bit debris in the tines there, so I'm going to give my pen a good clean. All their efforts, like I say, I don't want to say everything they did was a failure. Like, they had some, Jeff Johns and his vision of DC had some successes. That Zack Snyder, Dan DiDio, Jeff Johns stuff. Wonder Woman movie worked out for them, but maybe Aquaman with Jason Momoa, but that's kind of all that's coming to mind. The Flash, Barry Allen, didn't work out for them, not in film. Had a long-running CW show, but I don't know how popular that actually was. I think that DC's going back to Wally West because the Barry Allen movie didn't work out that well, and the Barry Allen actor is like notorious. Got him, like, was involved in a lot of weird stuff. So they're just gonna distance themselves, kind of. And one way to do that is like, reinstate Wally West, the redhead version, as the Flash. Kind of retire Barry Allen. I think DC's kind of wanting to distance themselves from the Green Lantern movie with Hal Jordan. That was a big bust, so they're investing more in John Stewart. He's got his Lantern show, which should be coming out pretty soon. Let me have a look at this. I wonder if we just need to water down our ink some. I'm not getting good flow with this pen at the moment. Not as good as I would like. So, as far as Cyborg, nothing big on the horizon with him as far as any projects. I haven't heard James Gunn mention him at all. In comic books, he's been just put on a kind of offshoot version of the Justice League Red. I think that's the only place you're really finding him much these days. So it seems he okay, there we go. Flowing good. It seems like his big push is kind of has wound down. Same with Hal Jordan. Same with Barry Allen. Kind of that Jeff Johns, Dan DiDio era is over and done with. Thank goodness. I really did not like it personally. I'm sure some people did. But I was not one of those people. I actually really disliked it. This was on a completely different page than those guys. So, ultimately, because we are coming to the end of my inking in this figure here. Yeah, that's what ended up happening. Like, these big efforts, the players that we talked about in the start, their stuff just did not work out well. Jeff Johns, New 52, Justice League Origin, Cyborg on the Justice League. And so we can look back on it. Like, so how did that work out? Did it work? Did it not? Now, here's what I want to say. I'm going to be completely fair. Even though, like, things in comics, yeah, they move along, you know, but that doesn't mean that something was just an abject failure. Now, sometimes the thing was. But just because something moves on to another phase doesn't always mean that it was just, things were completely botched. Do I think so? What do I do? Do I think that is the case of what happened here? Like, was it just abject failure? So, a lot of it was like, I would say everything. The films overall were abject failure. You had a couple successes, but a lot of bombs. Like Man of Steel. Okay, that made money, but that made money because people didn't know that was the start of your universe, and they didn't know it sucked yet. Now, when they found out it sucked, which was probably Batman v Superman, okay, your thing is kind of like people were a lot less like interested in showing up again and again for stuff like that, right? Green Lantern was a completely big bust. Now that wasn't the Snyderverse or whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to get myself ah some tissues I could clean, or napkins. I want to paper towels. I want to clean off my pen. But it was still like under those guys. Jeff Johns' name's attached to it. It's part of their vision, Hal Jordan is Green Lantern, all that stuff. Abject failure. There were a lot of failures, actually. Man of Steel, you can kind of say. Batman v Superman, definitely. Justice League, for sure. Green Lantern, definitely. A lot of bombs and critically panned films there. In the comics, New 52 and stuff. Yeah, I understand stuff moves on, but ultimately I would say this stuff just didn't work out well. Um, so finally those guys got removed, and they went on with completely different people. Like, I don't think we're gonna see Jeff Johns connected to any major DC project, maybe even ever again. He had his name on a lot of stuff, and a lot of it was just horrible, and just had a lot of like behind the scenes nonsense, like his Ray Fisher accusations, which I remember Ray Fisher said, I believe I'm getting this completely correct. Jeff Johns told him that we're gonna diminish your role in Justice League. He said that to the Ray Fisher, who is the Cyborg actor. We're going to diminish your role in Justice League because we cannot have the film centered around an angry black man. Those were apparently, allegedly, the words of Jeff Johns. And unsurprisingly, he did a Jeff Johns thing, took the black character and made him inconsequential and lame, and Jeff Johns does that. Why does he keep doing stuff? He has a track record of that. Where's my feather? Like, why does he do this? I don't know. Is it intentional? I mean, he's kind of telling you it's intentional if what he said there was actually true. Justice League, we don't want the film centered around a black character. I guess you could say so. Yeah, that I could believe, because I'm going off of actions here. Okay, I think my feather is actually flowing pretty good, but I see there's, hold on, there's a bit of debris on it. Like, was that your issue with John Stewart? Like, we cannot have the Green Lantern focused on a black character. Okay, now when I cleaned that off, I got the ink off. That, it kind of seems like, I don't know if that was their thought process, but it wouldn't, like, they weren't into doing anything for John Stewart, but suddenly you're doing all this cartoon and all this movie and all this stuff for Hal Jordan. I'll be fair though. Some people would say like, well, like, they did that because of the success of his Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think the ink that I have just, I'm going to water this ink. I kind of don't want to because I'm nearly done. But yeah, I think the ink just needs a bit more water to run well. I don't want to do that because, like I said, we're just finishing up here. Can't get some hatching in here. I don't think we need to, though. I don't think we need to. I think we have this. We still need to do the background, but I think I can do that without having you guys with me. We've rambled for like 2.5 hours talking about Cyborg. Yeah, ultimately, I would say that stuff didn't work out, and the people involved ultimately got what they deserved. They lasted a long time. They had some successes along the way. The Jeff Johns Green Lantern run, in comics was a big success. They failed completely to take the success that they had with the comic and bring it to a general audience. So, I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to just look at the Jeff Johns Green Lantern stuff as an overall failure? You can look at it that way, because overall, it didn't work out, and you ended up losing money. Worked with comics, but then they tried to put that into big budget films and cartoon shows, and just lost a ton of money doing it. His Justice League is critically panned. Like, Justice League Origin is not a good story. Some people have some fondness for like his Darkseid War, but ultimately his Justice League run was like not great. I can go in here and get some more hair texture now that I'm looking at it. Oftentimes when I think I'm done, I'll look at the stuff and just say, oh, I can do this and I can do that. I'm going to take an isograph and do that, especially since I think my ink, the solution I was using, needs a little bit more water. So we'll just go in with an isograph and, Dan Didio had some successes. New 52 was a success at first, but then it started to fall apart when people saw how mismanaged it was. I think it was a success because people showed up to see, like, similar to Man of Steel, they show up to see if it's going to be good. And some stuff worked out, like Azarella, Wonder Woman, Scott Snyder on Batman, but ultimately DC kind of very swiftly went a different direction. Ironically, with the DC helmed by Jeff Johns. They would eventually kind of be at odds with each other, eventually. Even though they did work a lot together and have, we're on the same page about a lot of stuff. Eventually something happened. Well, it could have been a lot of different things. Okay, we're getting in some more hair texture. Oh, can you not see what I'm working on? I'm sorry about that. So I would say overall, I'm trying to be generous, but when I do think about it overall, I would say, yeah, they ultimately stuff didn't work out. And I kind of go back to what I said. I'm not surprised because I was really not into that stuff, and I know not everything has to appeal to my particular sensibilities, but I do think it counts for something. You know what I mean? I could have got some of these lines in a little better. Because I think I probably relate more to that general audience person than the super comic book person. The comics have always been something that have been kind of challenging in various ways, alienating, stuff like that. I think they are for a lot of people who are minorities, honestly. The other stuff, in television, they just are more consciously aware of not doing that to people. Comic books are a bit more, have a history of being just more of a boys' club. So, a boys' club that's rooted in 80-year history. So you get kind of a lot more of that. Well, this is the way it's always been. And as I said, the way it's always been is not always better and sometimes should be questioned. I'm not saying all the time, but, you know, I think that just upholding things because of that, I think one should be willing to take a look at things and see if, like, well, you know what? Yeah, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe we should make some adjustments here and there. Um, I think that, yeah, we're just about done here. I think that's about all I really need to do. All right, everybody. So, yeah, it seems that DC kind of just is going a different direction, and now Cyborg is, you know, kind of his run, his big nothing burger of a run is over. Shame it didn't work out. To answer the question, uh, I don't think Cyborg was ever gonna work out. I don't think he was I said before, he's not the character that DC needed to do what DC wanted for him to do. And he would take a lot of creativity to build. I know what building mythology is like in comics. I literally sit here and I do it. I work hard at it. Um, you know, it takes effort. It takes a lot of creativity. You got to pour a lot of heart and soul and stuff into it, and you have to stick with it. You know, like, um, you have to be willing to stick with it. Like, even when it seems like, you know, it's not working out for you and stuff. You know, uh, and I don't think DC is willing to do that. Cyborg would need stuff like that. Now, you might be able to do stuff with them if you stick with it long enough, and you have to, a lot of things have to line up. You have to get the right people, people who want to do it, who have the ability to do it, to like build stuff around him and make him work. And they're just not incentivized to do it. The company's not doesn't care about sticking it out with him enough, even when he's not immediately turning a profit. You would need all of that stuff, and I just don't. It's unlikely that, you know, the company or even the creators would be willing to go to those lengths for him, like the lengths that I go to with for Zatswan. You know what I mean? So those are my thoughts on Cyborg. He was never really gonna work, but he was also mismanaged. Thanks for hanging out with me in this very, very long video. I had a lot of fun, you know, inking, and let me know what you think about this issue. We've been going like 2.5 hours. That's fine. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. That helps the channel out tremendously. Pick up Zatswan Multiversal Guardian in the link in the description. That also helps on Amazon. Again, only $2.99. And I look forward to more content. And until then, I will talk to all of you again very soon, okay? Take care until then.